Hello, everybody, and welcome to this webinar with Innovation Academy and Ideas UK. Today's topic is innovation and KPIs, key performance indicators. What gets measured gets done. So we're just waiting for a few attendees, so we'll just give it a minute or two for everyone else to join the room, and then we'll get going. You'll see at the bottom of your screen there's a chat pod, so feel free to drop in your name and your country if you want to let everyone know who's here. So feel free to introduce yourself, and we're going to get going in a minute or two. While we're waiting, more people joining us, we'll have a question and answer time at the end of this session. So if you've got a question, please feel free to drop it into the chat pod as we go. And we'll pick probably the 4 or 5 best questions and use them in a Q&A session at the end. So if you've got a question, please make a note of it in the chat pod as you go, and our facilitator will pick that up and we'll choose 4 or 5 to address in the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. So we'd love to hear your questions and thoughts. A few more people coming in, we'll just give it a minute and then we'll get going. Hi everybody, welcome to those of you that are joining us. Welcome to this webinar with Ideas UK and Innovation Academy. We're just waiting for a few more people to join us. Please feel free to drop your name and your country into the chat box. There's a little chat pod where you can introduce yourself. And if you have any questions as we go through today's webinar, please feel free to drop those questions into the chat pod and we'll pick 4 or 5 of the best to answer at the end of today's session. All right, so I think it's time to make a start. So welcome. Today's webinar session is innovation and key performance indicators. And what gets measured gets done. So let me introduce you to our panel today. We've got myself from the Innovation Academy. So the Innovation Academy, we like to think of ourselves as the experts in corporate learning solutions for innovation. And joining us today is the team from Ideas UK. So Zina, do you want to tell us a little bit about Ideas UK?
Yeah, thanks, Grant. So I'm Zina Cox, the Operations Director for Ideas UK. And for over 30 years, Ideas UK has really been at the forefront of employee innovation and engagement. Our purpose is really to harness the power of ideas within your organisation to help build that long-term value and employee engagement. And we're really a not-for-profit network organisation with a real diverse membership, passionate about sharing knowledge and experiences across different industries, sectors and countries. So if you're interested in joining us and getting involved, our details are at the end of the presentation, so please do get in touch.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been to a few of your events and they're amazing. And you've got events in the UK and in the Middle East, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a really broad range of organisations involved, including a couple from Cyprus, Germany and America too.
Amazing. Okay, cool. So we'll pick that up at the end of today. And let's take a look at our panel today. So my name is Grant. I'm the lead trainer for the Innovation Academy. Sina, tell us a little bit about your background.
So my background's in the pharmaceutical sector, and I actually did design and launch an innovation program within my old company, Merck, or MSC as they're known in the UK. I also now work with a myriad of organisations on their innovation programs to really support them to develop those and enhance those programs further. And recently I've just joined the British Standards Institute to support the development of some innovation standards too.
Amazing, and it's also my pleasure to welcome Tammy. Tammy from Western Medical Health Sciences Network. So Tammy, nice to have you with us. Tell us a little bit about your background and your organisation.
Yeah, so I think I've been working now for the NHS for about 20 years. I predominantly started working as an innovation manager and an R&D manager, so I've spent a lot of time in regional trusts actually setting up innovation teams and trying to drive innovation regionally and locally. But now I work for the West Midlands Academic Health Science Network, so our role is very much around supporting the regional import and export of innovation and ideas sort of from the West Midlands, but also globally. So I spend a lot of time working with clinicians, looking at problems and challenges and ideas, but also supporting companies that are looking to get their products sold into the healthcare services.
Amazing. And last but not least, Emma Cowan. So Emma, tell us a little bit about your background, and you've just taken on a new role, right?
I have, yes. I was doing this role that's described here in BT for many years, working in open innovation alongside the innovation consultants, research and development, and innovation scouting, and we specifically ran the New Ideas scheme in conjunction with those guys. Also helping and talking to and pushing innovation through the new waves coming into BT through things like the apprenticeship group and the graduates. Left BT at the end of February, and I've now taken on a job in UK research and innovation. And I'm involved in the innovation funding for some of the innovation challenge directors, and specifically an Audience of the Future, which is around immersive technology in the creative and arts sector. So everything from film, TV to museums and gaming. And what we do is we look at making sure that that sector takes the best advantage of new technology and digital technology in that industry.
Amazing. So we've got a super range of industries and experts represented. So thanks so much for joining us today. I think we're in for a treat. KPIs and innovation from the trenches, really getting it done. So let's dive in and talk about KPIs. So Zena, why do you think KPIs are important when it comes to innovation?
So for me, I think when I think about KPIs, I think about numbers and statistics, and statistics fundamentally deal with uncertainty. When you think about innovation, successful innovation promises much benefits to the organisation, but we also know there's a big risk of failure too. So I think for me, getting KPIs not only says to the organisation that you're going to be serious about doing innovation, that you're going to measure this, and you want to establish those desired innovation behaviours. It also really helps you to kind of track, develop and guide the innovation systems and processes that you're putting in place, and also know that you're actually achieving your goals. I think, you know, when maybe our efforts go a little awry, unless we're actually measuring what we're doing, we don't know what the problem is and therefore how to fix it. So for me, KPIs are really critical in really guiding the development of your program to greater success, but also sometimes proving to perhaps senior management that actually the money, the resources, the effort that we're putting into kind of our innovation programs are really paying dividends for the company. And I think those KPIs should really also be linked to the strategic objectives of your organisation and kind of why you're developing that innovation program in the first place, what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, amazing. So bringing that structure and clarity to the sometimes murky world of innovation where there's so many things. Yeah. Emma, for you, why are KPIs important?
I think actually the reason the KPIs are important is because you want to be able to have a view of all the ideas that you're dealing with, and KPIs allow you to do that because you're pulling in that information, not only to measure and monitor it, but also to sort of see where there may be some pinch points. And I also see it's the best representation of how agile your organisation is in terms of delivering new ideas, because if you can see that through your KPIs, i.e. dwell times or cycle times, then you'll know that actually the reality might not match what the belief is. So I think it's really important, but also in terms of unlocking barriers for specific ideas, particularly in certain areas. And you often find that if you do some kind of innovation challenge where you're asking ideas in a certain area, it gives you an understanding as to why you needed that challenge in the first place, because you can suddenly have real clarity around where the issues are in making the transformational changes.
Yeah, true. And Tammy, have KPIs been valuable for your organisation?
Yeah, definitely. So for us, we've actually got 3 commissioners that commission the work we do around our kind of ideas and innovation management services. So for us, it's being able to show them that we are delivering on what they've asked us to do. But I think most importantly, because we are spending the public money, it's about us being able to show the patients and the public that we're spending their money and that actually we are doing what they need us to do when they need us to do it, and that we're actually getting the impact that they require for the money that we're actually spending.
Yeah, so return on investment and clarity on how we might best use that investment. That's great. All right, so we're going to dive in and take a look at the types of KPIs or key performance indicators that you might want to take a look at. And I just wanted to show you this, listeners, just to sort of start the discussion. We've recently expanded the Innovation Mini MBA to include almost a whole day on innovation accounting and KPIs. And we generally think that there should be 4 areas of KPIs in an organization. We talk about activities mix, so what type of things are you doing? Portfolio health, how well have you spread your innovation budget or investments or bets, for want of a better word, into different areas of innovation. And then the 2 areas that we're particularly going to spend some attention on today, productivity and financial returns. We wanted to focus in this webinar on productivity and financial returns because they're probably the areas where KPIs can give you the biggest return for your investment, and especially if you're starting out in your innovation journey. Financial returns, ROI, is going to be a key area, and then productivity, how well are we leveraging the resources that we're investing? And perhaps we might do a follow-up webinar on some of those other areas. So we're going to dive in and take a look at those. So Zena, Emma, do you want to chat to us a bit about some of the inputs or process metrics that we might use and which ones have worked for you?
Yeah, so I think to start with, the input or process metrics, if you think back to the kind of block diagram that Grant just put up, this is kind of your bottom left-hand corner. So this is really where you start. If you're starting out with an innovation program, or even as long as you have one running in your organization, this is about, I guess, tracking how productive that program is. So for me, there are kind of a mixture here of those engagement metrics, such as you may have gone out and bought licenses for everyone to be able to work on the platform, but how many of those people have gone onto the system, have engaged, have added a comment, have added an idea. So there's all of those kind of engagement, how many people have been trained on innovation within your organization. I guess they're your input metrics. And then for me, the other side of this is around your process metrics. So how effectively is your process working? So I guess most of us who have an innovation program will also have some sort of map where ideas go through different stages or cycles and evaluation and stage gates. And it's how effective is that process itself working to actually deliver innovations, actual results at the end. So that can be anything from time to first evaluation to how long it takes an idea to literally go from the start to the finish. So Emma, I know you've had a lot of experience kind of working with these kind of process metrics because the BT program is incredibly successful. So what would you say were kind of some of the most important that you measured on a almost daily basis?
I think for us, it was the first thing we wanted to know is who is engaging and why. So we could see sort of hot topics emerging, and initially you're able to field that into sort of those program managers straight away and go, we're getting a lot of ideas about this issue. We need some, so that was the first thing we could identify. And then it was about, the amount of engagement and where in the business the people were getting involved, and then about how, they were moving through the initial stages. So were we getting stuff that was fairly local, or were we getting stuff that was actually the big stuff that we were really interested in? And also then we were able to see whether that fitted into our sort of transformation strategy, and that was really important as well. And then it was a case of A to B to C to D in the process. So how quickly are these ideas moving through the initial what we call pre-screen, and then to how we were mapping those to evaluators. Were we getting that right? Was there a good proportion of accuracy in where we were getting these ideas to first time, that right first time thing? And also then the amount of dwell time it was taking within that evaluation process. Were there some evaluators getting too much stuff, and were there some people just simply not getting enough that should have been? So it gave you an enormous amount of rich data in terms of who's engaging, how they're engaging, and how quickly what kinds of ideas innovations you're getting in, and then how quickly through the process they went. And I think also when you got your idea to some kind of fruition, to say you got it to adoption, that again that process was measured. How quickly and how agile is the company then moving that into launch and getting that idea live? So that was always really, really very valuable to us, because we could give people some real raw data in terms of how quickly innovation happens from concept and idea to actually launching out live into the business.
So there's some amazing ideas there, yeah.
I think this really gives you, from what you've described, Emma, the, I guess, value of your program in terms of how effectively it's working. So to enable you to really see what's really successful to continue doing, but also where your pinch and pain points are that that process may need tweaking in a certain direction to make the whole end-to-end process work more smoothly.
Absolutely. And what we also then started to do as we started to mature that process, we were able to start weighting ideas by value, because we didn't want to start chasing around ideas worth, 50,000 if you've got ideas in there worth 10 million. So, we wanted to know what are the big hitters and where should we be putting our resources, because we're all resource short. And also, if you've got those numbers, if you can say to your organisation or your directors, look, this is the cost of the programme, but for every pound we spend, this is what we deliver. And at one point, for every pound we spent on that scheme, we were getting £104 back, which is ridiculous. And but because we were able to see where the money was, see which ideas were the big hitters, all the ideas would be managed through the system, but we could then plan our resources around where do we really need to get the best innovations and ideas through quickly and get them to launch into the business. And that is incredibly valuable and a really compelling story that you can then tell your organisation when people come to you and say, how is your new ideas scheme working?
You had me at 1,000% return on investment. Can't go wrong with that. And Tammy, we're going to bring you in a little bit later just to tell us about how you took some of these and built a whole program and case study around it. So we'll chat about that. Let's take a look at some output metrics. So Zena, talk to us about output metrics.
So I guess this is, what your senior management, your C-suite are really looking for. What are the real benefits that having an innovation program, be it an internally facing one, looking for employee ideas, or an externally facing one, are really going to bring in the organisation? I mean, we have here kind of a mixture of kind of top line. So we're looking at revenue generated, and that can be in cash terms, in percent terms, or kind of bottom line, so more cost saved and efficiencies gained. And again, for me, your output metrics should link directly to why you have an innovation program in the first place, which should also link to your strategic goals for your organization. So for me, it's really important to just maybe pick one or two output metrics, but that really link into and demonstrate why innovation within your organization brings real benefits to the organization now and for the future.
Yeah, and Emma, some thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would agree entirely. What's most important is that people do understand, the value of the innovation initiative that you're doing. And I think strategic alignment is absolutely key, because if you're getting loads of great ideas in, but they're not really in the area that, your business is focusing on, then again, it's very hard to get the ear of those who are going to really push it. So I think Zena's absolutely right in saying, get that strategic alignment, even if it means changing the way you communicate your challenges or your ideas scheme, or the way that you move it forward. But that is absolutely key to its ongoing success. And don't be afraid to keep changing the KPIs based on those strategic needs. You may find that your KPIs become a little bit kind of old hat or out of date based on the fact that a strategy has changed or the business direction has changed. So don't be afraid to go back and say, right, what should we be measuring now to make sure our output information is as attractive as possible to those who are supporting the program and get the best engagement going forward.
And I'd actually say that Emma's just raised a really important point, because we often fix metrics and we go, these are our metrics for innovation, and I'd really consider them more as living things. So don't be afraid to kind of modify and change and adapt the metrics that you use as your innovation maturity within the organisation changes too. I know, Tammy, you don't always kind of work on the standard ROI. So for you, kind of what kind of output metrics are important within kind of your role within the NHS?
So I think for us, we do some output metrics around kind of our economic growth piece. So we do look at some of the kind of the sales for some of the companies that we deal with. A lot of our metrics are actually with some of our stakeholders and how we've supported that process. And we look at jobs created, inward investment and things like that. It's always been a bit of a challenge for us, because obviously the value and the outputs that we see aren't necessarily directly for our organisation. They're in a variety of organisations that we support. So we have had a bit of a challenge actually getting some of those metrics back. But we do look at some of the metrics around intellectual property. We do look at patents and collaboration agreements, license agreements and things like that. But actually the real value for us is actually at the end of that, is what's actually happened. Once we've got a patent, what's actually happened to the value and the impact of the patients as a result of that.
Super. And just a reminder to listeners that have joined us today, we'd love to get your questions. So if there's something there that sparked your interest and you want to ask a question or get some clarity, please don't hesitate to drop some questions into the chat pod on your screen, and we'll pick 2 or 3 of the best questions to answer at the end of this session. So thanks so much. That's been a really interesting idea about a blend of KPIs that we could take and measure, and so much more than just the sort of pure finance ones. So I loved all that. Let's dive into some case studies. So the first case study that we're going to take a look at is HSBC. So Zina, are you going to talk us through HSBC and what they did there?
Yeah, so HSBC have been members of Ideas UK for a very long time now, and the guy that heads innovation for the UK also sits on the Ideas UK advisory board. They've taken, just to give you a little background, a slightly different take, I guess, on ideas, and they call them bubbles. So they are looking to pop bubbles and reap rewards in that way. So how they have looked at this, they are clearly a bank and a financial sector, so we're looking at more return on investment here, is they have undergone an exercise alongside their finance department. And I would say again, sometimes when we're in innovation, we are expected to do everything ourselves, but do reach out to those other departments within your organisations that can really support you. And I guess when it comes to metrics and KPIs, finance is absolutely the obvious place to go. And what they've done is they've effectively scoped out the costs of a number of different items, from headed note paper to plain paper to time of all the different, I guess, roles within the organisation are banded, band A, B, C, D, etc. And how much does a 5 minutes or 1 day of that time cost for that individual? And they're now building into their software platform, in this case they use Wazuku, a kind of a resource calculation at the end of every single idea. So they're really thinking and looking from the start when they're creating ideas of how much is this going to, for example, save the bank, because they're not particularly into sales in terms of their ideas perhaps, but how much cost saving will this save us? And there's effectively a calculation. So there's standard costs that are now being built into the system, drop-down menus that you can select how many minutes, for example, or the amount of paper that you've saved, times the frequency of which that saving is made per day or per month or per year, and it will come out with a cost of the idea at the end. They actually only look at a 1-year basis for their cost savings. Obviously, some people look at 3-year, a 5-year window, but HSBC have chosen to look at a 1-year window for their cost savings. And it just gives them a rough calculation of, I guess, again, it's those bottom line savings that they're achieving from some of their ideas. What they don't do is clearly, if somebody's saving 5 minutes of their day, that adds up to kind of quite significant time over the period of a year. So they don't necessarily say we have saved £20,000, but what they would say is we've now created an extra 20 hours that could be in front of customers. So with customer facing times, one of the tasks, because this isn't looking about making people redundant or taking money and budget away from a branch, for example, but it is looking at kind of how much extra work can now be done within that same time frame. So it's just a way that they've utilised to calculate. And as I say, because all this calculation is completed within their platform, then again, it's really easy to track and see the savings on a whole across the organisation as well. So I think it's just quite a neat way to do it, which takes a bit of upfront investment, but actually could be definitely worthwhile to be able to show those bigger benefits in the long term.
Well, I love this idea, because we sometimes think innovation has to be these grand schemes or leapfrog processes, but actually just in small refinements, a few minutes a day, that's a huge investment back into the business. So this is a really great idea, and an idea for a tool that we could take and use, I guess, to get every single person thinking about innovation and their time and resources every single day. So that's awesome.
Absolutely.
Super. Let's go and take a look at BT. So Emma's going to take us through a case study of KPIs in practice at BT. So Emma, tell us a little bit about this.
Okay, first of all, I'm going to be absolutely honest and not take credit for this, Excel masterpiece. This was a colleague of mine. I'm the kind of person who sees an Excel spreadsheet and has to sit down and have a small weep before I start. But this was created by one of our one of my colleagues. And what he did was, excuse me, he looked at where our dwell times were. So he wanted to know, right, how long does it take from an idea coming into an idea being delivered, and how are we managing it? So when we're closing ideas, how quickly are we managing it? So for example, when you look at this, if you look at the red bubble at the top, they are the outstanding ideas that were submitted. So that oldest one there is a February 16. Yeah. Now the bottom bubble, the green bubble, is the ones that have been dealt with and closed, where they've been evaluated and closed down, or they've moved to adoption and closed down, or they've been launched. So that means it's been done. So those are adopted ideas, and a low position is good. It means the size of the number of ideas. So the purple bubble, that just gives you an idea. That circle gives you an idea that if those ideas remaining open closed on that day, that would be set in stone. That would be the average date evaluation if all ideas completed today. Once it's dealt with, that's it. Yeah. So it was a great way of us having a visual view of our own kind of our own sort of process times in terms of dealing with ideas. It also allowed us to have the more awareness of the activity, understand where ideas were maybe not scoped early on, support those ideas that were finding it difficult to move forward, unlock barriers, pick up any stakeholder challenges, because that's another thing. You might have a stakeholder taking an idea forward at a rapid pace and then they move on or leave the business, and you need to make sure you catch that, and also any strategy changes as well. So this just helped us have a great, one pager, one view of our management dwell times of ideas coming in.
I love that. Picture really does sort of speak 1,000 words. Zena, anything there stand out for you? What did you love about this?
I really love this because as you say, it's so pictorial. You can see with the red small bubbles, those ideas that they could be huge ideas. So it might not be bad that they've taken so long to kind of be fully evaluated and scoped to close. But it really just, in one snapshot, gives you how your process is operating and whether it's operating effectively, which ideas you may need to chase. And it's just such a simple way, simple visual. And as Emma says, she's not keen on spreadsheets. So you don't have to even have a spreadsheet to understand what's going on here, which is what I love.
But for us, this also made us focus on the improvement of the scheme. So as you can see, it's getting better and better and better as we were going along. So we were getting quicker and more rapid at making sure ideas, were being dealt with more quickly. So it made us look out at our evaluator community and refresh that. It made us look at our overall processes on chasing and how often we got updates, having an overall story of each idea. So for us, it was a view of how well we were doing and whether we were improving as well.
I love that as an idea. So listeners, 2 bits of useful information. All of this is going to be in handouts that you'll be able to download at the end of the seminar. So all of these pictures you'll be able to download and take a look at. And then we'd love to hear your questions. So if you've got some questions for our expert panel, please drop them into the questions pod on your screen and we'll pick them up at the end of the session. And now we're going to take a look at KPIs in practice, a really cool example by Western Midlands of how they put KPIs and dashboards into practice. So Tammy, do you want to tell us about this project?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, as an organisation, we have 3 quite different commissioners, and also we work with a very sort of large variety of stakeholders, right from clinicians who work at the front line, chief executives, sort of small, medium businesses, large pharma companies, academic institutions. Generally, if they're interested in working in kind of healthcare innovation, then we're open to working with them. So essentially we have our KPIs, and as most people do, we do fill in a quarterly report, full metrics. It's all very laborious, all very complicated on a very large spreadsheet, but doesn't generally mean a lot to a lot of people. And really, when we're going out to speak to people, and we really need to show the value of what we're doing and show that we are providing a return on investment for the public purse and building a reputation, those kind of standalone figures really weren't doing it. And as an organisation, we're very big on having that discussion around, well, so what? When we're talking to clinicians, we're talking to industry, and we say we can help, so what? Why would they spend their time with us? So what we wanted to do really was to devise a way that we can really look at some of the high impact metrics that we're recording each year and provide a very sort of small snapshot to use as a vehicle to show people and talk to people about what we do to build that reputation and show that value. A lot of people that we deal with, they have very little time. It's quite difficult to get their attention in the first place. So actually to be able to show them on one page some of those kind of high impact KPIs and what we've done around them is really valuable to get those discussions going. So this is an example of one of our annual our pictures around the economic impact annually. We tend to do this every year. We utilise it in presentations and things like that. And we've had quite a lot of good feedback around it, because if you look at it, just by looking at it really quickly, you can see some of the things that we've done. So we have supported 3,000 companies, which when you're looking to engage with companies, it shows that actually we are there to support people, and we have supported innovation. So for example, on this, we've supported 477 innovations, and I think this was for last year. This has been really useful, and I think one of the things that we're starting to do a little bit more now is really acknowledge how we can take some of these pictures and actually put those into real people. So we've started to use this alongside links for videos where we've gone out to talk to some of the patients that benefited from some of the ideas and the innovations, and some of the clinicians and companies, and actually having a live document that we can send out to people that gives people this snapshot of the things that we've done and the highlights that we've had for that year. But actually if they want to know more, they can click on and hear it from the mouth of the people that we've actually supported. And I think this has really, really been quite useful. And it's also been useful for us as a team to actually sit and look at the innovations and look at the KPIs and see what actually are the important ones that need to be communicated to some of our stakeholders. And actually that sometimes changes depending on who you talk to. So we have got different versions of this. We have split our organisation into sort of three main elements. So we've got our innovation exchange work, which kind of covers the ideas, and some of the support services and the economic growth side. But then we've also got part of our organisation that concentrates on the implementation and adoption of innovation, and we've also got a digital element that concentrates on digital. So we're able to do a very sort of quick snapshot of them, but also then tailor some of these pictures and some of these messages to some of the audiences that we've been talking to. And it's been a really useful tool really to really narrow down that message when you've only got sort of 2 minutes or an elevator pitch in front of a senior executive that you want to get on board. It's a really useful tool to really kind of hone that message down.
Yeah, I think that's a super idea of how we might make our KPIs a really powerful sort of focus people's attention and garner senior executive support. Asina, for you, what do you love about this idea?
Again, for me, it's how visual this is. It's a really simple way to demonstrate the benefits that innovation is bringing to the whole region. For me, this kind of talks to a lot of different, like Tammy said, different networks, different organizations, but there is something for everyone. And I think the fact they're taking it to the next level and actually creating some videos that sit behind this to give that real personal impact and personal benefit to innovation. We often just look at numbers, and I know senior people in organization just focus on the numbers often. However, to get that kind of personal take behind it, I think is really great too.
Yeah, super. And we've got time for a few questions. So I've got one from Richard Morgan. Richard, thanks for this. And the question to the expert panel is, how do you demonstrate benefits from the outset? So senior leaders want to know what financial benefits will be before we start to look at an idea or project, and you end up with a chicken or egg situation. So got any ideas on how we might demonstrate benefits in the early outset?
So I guess that for me, the first thing is you cannot measure what isn't actually happened as yet. So you're right, it is a bit of a chicken and egg. I think one thing you can do is almost build into your process when you're asking people for their ideas, for them to give you some sort of benefit or outcome that they believe that idea will generate. So perhaps it's scenario planning. The worst scenario would be we break even. The best scenario, we could make £1 million, and probably the idea may be somewhere in between. So I would say there is potentially an element of scenario planning, best guessing at this stage. But when you're really at that initiation of your journey, I think it's more about looking at what the potential could be, because clearly, as I say, you can't measure what hasn't already happened. But Emma and Tammy, you've been there, so perhaps you have some thoughts.
Yeah, I think for me, it's in early on, like I agree with Zine, you can't measure something that's not happened yet. But what I would say is early on, the benefits of the rich data, you can see trends, pinch points, hot topics, and even maybe identify some industry disruptive ideas. So you've got to kind of put on you've got to really focus on the potential there. So you can't focus on what's happened, but you can focus on the potential. And I think that having that kind of rich data is hugely beneficial early on. So that would be your early win for me by doing these KPIs.
Yeah, and I think from our point of view, I mean, with the NHS, they're quite risk averse generally with doing anything, and we do have quite a lot of conversations, and we ask out at the outset around sort of the perceived benefits, not just for the organisation, but for the region as a whole and for patients. And a lot of our discussion is actually, do we feel that the risk sort of outweighs the benefit, and can we manage that risk? Because there's a lot of there is a little bit of guesswork, but we do have a lot of multidisciplinary conversations where we kind of trial that idea out and do a bit like kind of feasibility before we take anything forward.
I think probably the final point on that question is, and it comes slightly away from metrics, but again, it relates to your senior leadership team and how willing they are to take some of those risks and to take that leap of faith for the potential benefits that could come. And that is probably a topic of conversation you need to have with them around kind of why you're planning to set up an innovation program, what you're looking to achieve, and how you might achieve that too.
Yeah, I've got that's great. I've got another one from Sirdar. This is a question for Emma and any of the other panelists. How did BT employ any similar methods like the evaluation cycle times to measure ROI or effectiveness versus adoption or evaluation days? How does that sound?
So, meaning how did we work out the conversion rates from evaluation and conversion rates from adoptions?
Yeah, I think so. And then measuring the ROI of that.
We did do that, yeah, because we worked out that the percentage that went through from pre-screen to evaluation and how much we were able to kind of fast fail, because fast fail is important. People think it's a negative, but it's not, as long as the feedback goes back and you're having that ongoing communication with your submitters. Fast fail shouldn't be a negative, and you don't want to be stressing or straining your evaluator capability with unnecessary stuff. Also looking at we had percentage figures on what was successful through evaluation, and we also had success figures on what was successful in adoption. So the last time we did adoption, it was 1 in every 3 went to launch, and adoption in the BT cycle was all about doing the kind of cost analysis, the business case, the testing, trialing, etc., etc. So that was the real live business cases that were ongoing, and 1 in every 3 was successful to launch. So yeah, we did have the data metrics on what percentage of from each section did it move forward. And again, it was, that was really important, because it's really important for your resource management. You need a lean approach, and it can help you take more of a portfolio approach to ideas and projects coming through. So you've only got so much resource, and you want to make sure that that's put in the right place. So yeah, those metrics are important.
Super. And then this one's for Zina from Michelle. Zina, how might you differentiate between innovation and improvement projects? So some related to improve one's processes, but similar processes are used in other organizations as innovation. So how would you differentiate between the two?
So I think it's a really interesting question, and I think everyone has a different take on this. Personally, I've got a background in Sigma, so I'm black belt trained and qualified. So I think that this actually dovetails, and for me, it's part of a spectrum. So I think you have incremental improvement at one side, doing something slightly better today than you did yesterday, and then at the other end of your spectrum, you have your disruptive innovation, where you're completely changing the market. So for me, it isn't about one or the other. I think often organizations may start at the incremental end, and then as their capability grows, then that spreads through. You have organizations such as Rico, whose whole methodology is focused on continual improvement, but some of those continual improvement ideas will turn into really big game changers. And they task everyone within their organization to literally come up with 3 ideas to improve their job every single year, and that forms part of their performance. So that really is at the incremental end versus, you know, a company that launches something totally different and disrupts the market. So I don't think for me it necessarily matters which end of that spectrum you're at. I think that's about your capabilities, what you're trying to achieve as an organization, whether those small cost savings or those small benefits add up to something big, which they often do, or whether you're really setting out to say we need to change and we need to change now. And that's probably a different approach to innovation. However, how you measure both of those, I think, is equally important. They might be different metrics, but it's about measuring the process and the success that you achieve.
Totally.
I think that's probably a woolly answer to a question, but for me it's a spectrum.
Yeah, and incremental can be as powerful as leapfrog, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Zena, I've got another one for you. 2 comments related to the time taken to track costs in such detail at HSBC. 1, is it possible to apply that HSBC idea to small businesses? And 2, would that contribute to more agile, larger organizations?
Yeah, I mean, they didn't, when they talked to me about the system that they'd applied, clearly I could see it would take a bit of time and involvement, but it was an exercise, I guess, that they will do kind of once and then review. So I think it depends on how important being able to quantify your outcome is. I think there's no reason why a smaller organization couldn't do it. And also, I guess you're looking at, you know, what are you trying to measure again? So if it's employee engagement, actually the fact you've saved a piece of paper may not be important to you, because it's about whether employees are not taking sick days and are more engaged when they come to work, for example. So again, for me, it comes down to kind of why have you got that program in the first place? If it is about cost savings, then I do think it is important to perhaps quantify these things, and it's looking at ways and methods that you can do it that works for your organisation, because I'm a firm believer that one size does not fit all. I think the other useful thing about what HSBC have done is they have a platform and they're capturing those costs within the platform. So they've kind of turned it into quite a simple process for the end user, in terms of you can have drop down boxes and you click on the number of minutes or which band you are, and the calculation happens for you. So although there was some significant time up front, I think the end process is now much, much more simple as a result.
Super. And then we've got time for one more question. So this question is from Ken, and it says, how often can you change innovation plans and how will that impact on the organization? So Ken, this one really strikes a chord with me. And sometimes I think that we might need to change up our innovation plans because we're perhaps using a limited set of KPIs. So today's message is really to broaden and pick the very best KPIs that enable. And if that needs to change, I definitely think you should. But for our panel, anyone got some thoughts on this? How often can you change innovation plans and how will that impact the organization?
I'm quite happy to sort of put something in for that.
Yeah,
I think for us, we're actually quite responsive, and we find it quite useful to sort of change and adapt as we go through the year. The organisations that we work with often are in various different states of restructure or integration or financial measures, and actually being able to respond as an organisation to some of those challenges that are facing the organisations and stakeholders that we work with actually is really beneficial for us. And also some of the the KPIs develop as well over the year, because we find that there's actually benefits that we are providing and impacts that are happening that we possibly didn't think of at the outset. And being able to reflect on those and adapt as we go through the year, I think has also helped us develop and build as an organisation. And I think for us, especially if we hadn't been able to do that, I think we'd have been quite stagnant and possibly wouldn't have been able to have the impacts that we have had.
Thanks, Tammy. That's really, really useful insight. So our time is almost up. Zena, can I ask you to tell us about the ideasUK International Conference that's coming up soon?
Yeah, so we actually have an annual conference each year where we also judge our Idea of the Year competition. However, it's a great opportunity to bring our network and those who are yet to be in our network together to really talk about what we're doing within organisations around our ideas management and innovation capabilities. So we have some great speakers. We have BT futurologists. We have the Williams F1 engineering team representative coming up to talk about how they kind of manage innovation within their organisations, and that touches on that continuous improvement topic as well. But this year we're in Edinburgh on the 13th and 14th of November. So if you would like to find out more or join us, then please do get in touch.
Can I just add to that I've had some really, really good conversations about KPI and metrics at this conference. So we definitely learned a lot and took a lot away and shared a lot of best practice at this conference. So I would say that was one of the key conversations we were having at this conference last year, Zena.
Yep.
Super. So we got to be there. Yeah, it looks amazing. You had me sold at the photo, I think. That alone, yeah. All right. And then if you'd like to meet Zena and some of the team, please join myself, Rodi, and a panel of experts. We've got a whole lot of innovation mini MBAs running all around the world. October in Amsterdam, November in Cape Town and London, and then Singapore, and finally December in Boston in the USA. So if you'd like to dive in, meet some of our interesting guest speakers and learn about innovation, sort of end-to-end seamless process, we'd love to see you at the 5-day Innovation Mini MBA. So finally, we'd get in touch. Zena, your details there. Do you want to give us your details quick so we can reach out to you for ideasUK?
Yep, so we've got a website which is simple, www.ideasuk.com, or you can email us at info or Zena, either way, but info@ideasuk.com. So look forward to hearing from you, and hopefully some of you will join us too.
Yeah, we'll see you in Edinburgh. And then if you'd love to get some more information about the Innovation Mini MBA, my colleague Paul Mikowski is standing by waiting for your call, and reach out to us on web or Twitter. To our panelists, thank you so much. That was a remarkable insight for 30-40 minutes. It was amazing. So thanks so much for your time, and hopefully see you next webinar.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Super. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.